So Chargent's primary focus is we do payment processing on the Salesforce platform. So you can think of us actually like a middleware for payments on the Salesforce platforms. We offer an API. We also offer connection to today 15 different databases. We're adding new databases all the time. Probably by this time next year we'll actually have close to 100 if our plans go through as we're planning. But at the moment we've got about 15, and if customers need a new one, we go ahead and add it for them. So that's basically what we do, is enable Salesforce customers to be able to charge for their products and services inside of Salesforce.com directly. So I'll kind of take you through a demo of how our customers would typically use our software. So to begin with, we just got the help page, of course, but really kind of the core of what we do is our gateways. And so as I mentioned, we support about 15 different gateways today globally. So those range from all the most common ones like Authorize.net and CyberSource to things like Realix. If you're happen to be from Europe, you're probably familiar with them, or Barclays Card, and some of the other ones are also European. We also connect with Payflow Pro. I mean, you can kind of see the list here. So we connect to a bunch of these. One of the things that our customers find quite interesting is the fact that you can run multiple gateways in a single org. That's interesting in a couple of different ways. We've got one customer who, they never shared with me the exact reason. I was a little afraid to ask, honestly. But they needed to get money into 50 different bank accounts. And our solution enabled them to do that. And they basically wrote some code that said, if these rules are true, send the payment this direction. And if those rules are true, obviously send the payments that direction. But then we've got another one who did what I call it load balancing. So they basically knew that for the first $2 million worth of transactions, they got a really good rate with a particular vendor. And so first $2 million went there. They weren't allowed to charge more for whatever reason, so they went to a different one. And if it was an American Express, they got a better rate over at that vendor. And so they moved them around like that. Mine and my demonstration org here is a little bit more straightforward. I just want to be able to show sometimes what it looks like with tokenization or without tokenization, or what it looks like on a different gateway. And so my purposes here are a little bit more simplistic. But basically a gateway record in our system is very straightforward. This is where you go to set up all the different parameters to go with that particular gateway. So, we support features like tokenization. So, if you're not familiar with the payments industry, tokenization is where you can send off the credit card data. You don't want to store it in your database for PCI compliance reasons typically. So you'll send it over to your gateway and say, why don't you keep the credit card and just hand me back what we call a token, right? So we've all been to the arcade. You give them $1, they give you 4 tokens to go put in the machine, and that token represents currency while you're in the arcade, right? Similar thing here. When you're using tokenization, they're going to pass back what we call a token. And if I go look at one of these transactions here, we can see in this case, this is what a Stripe token looks like in this case. And so basically, anytime I go to charge this particular credit card, I just send them that token, and it's as good as having the credit card. And of course, that helps with PCI compliance. So that's just one of the many features our customers could set up. We've recently rolled out a feature called Payment Console, and so to kind of further helping one of the things we do is help our customers lower PCI scope, okay? So one of the ways we've done that is by making sure we never ever store the credit card inside of the database. And we did that through a feature we call Payment Console, which we're not going to show tonight, but that's one of the things you can configure inside of the gateway. So the gateway is kind of a core concept to our system, and basically gives you a way to communicate with either one gateway in a fairly sophisticated way, or you can communicate with multiple gateways however you see fit. So that's kind of the back end. When you go to set it up, you're going to put in some gateways and get all of that going. Now your end users are going to have I would argue, quite a bit simpler experience. And so many of us are familiar with Salesforce, kind of the point to the meetup, I believe. So we're probably all familiar with opportunities. So our solution actually works in 3 different manners. You can either do it in opportunities, which is probably our most popular version, but you can also use it in cases. So we've got certain companies that have large call centers. So one of our customers is a real estate website that you're probably all familiar with. And when you call into their call center and want to update your credit card, they type that credit card into our system, send it over to Chase Payment Tech, update the profile with Chase Payment Tech, and then your credit card never gets stored in their database or in the Salesforce database. And so that's an instance where they're using our cases object. And finally, we have one called Chargent orders. And if you want to, kind of stay away from, for any given reason, the kind of full CRM licenses with Salesforce, you would probably consider our Chargent orders object as a way to go. So anyways, I bring that up now to say all the functionality I'm going to show you today works the same on all three of our different packages. I just happen to have opportunities installed in my demo orgs, and that's what we'll be looking at today. So basically, what we've done is rather than kind of continue to extend your org with more and more objects, we've tried to go and integrate to the places we think are most reasonable inside of Salesforce. So again, being the opportunities. So if we look at opportunities here, this client information section, this is all your basic bill to information, right? It looks probably pretty familiar with what we're all used to with e-commerce. We got to tell them where to ship something and so on. We've got that here. And probably many of us know you got to verify the address. It's a way to get better rates with your gateways and credit card processors. So we store all of that data for them in the client information section. A lot of our customers will write triggers to copy it over from a contact that's related or an account that's related, whatever makes sense there. A contract object is common as well. You can do any of this type of stuff. With the payment information, so in this section we're doing a really simple, there's actually a massive amount of fields on here for what we really need. The truth is, when I'm running a single payment, all I really need to identify is that it's in fact a credit card. The rest of this will actually populate for me automatically, and the only other part I really need to say is what's the credit card number I want to charge, expiration dates, codes, so on and so forth. So I can actually just cancel out of this. I didn't actually update anything. And if I was in the call center and took a phone call from this particular customer that wanted to buy an additional service, all I really have to do is go in and update how much I want to charge and say charge them. And I get an approved transaction like you see here. Now, the screen's going to refresh, and the reason it does that is that we've gone ahead and added a new transaction. So basically, inside of our system, one of the big benefits you get from us is that we bring all that transaction data from your credit card processor, or your gateway really, and kept it here inside of Salesforce for you. That kind of seems like a simplistic concept, but ultimately it's usually why people buy our product, is because we can bring all this data into somewhere where it's really simple to report on. And we'll go into reporting here in a few moments. But basically, anytime you take action with Chargent, you're going to get a new transaction. So if we look at the time here, it looks like it's about 7:22 tonight on the 6th. And so this is my newest transaction. So let's go ahead and drill into one of these transactions. We took a brief look before, but I kind of want to walk you through what the key functionality is here. So if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, first off, we start off with our Chargent transaction ID. This gateway date is actually the date we received from the gateway when we made the transaction. And then we have a transaction ID. So a lot of times your accountants are going to want to go in and reconcile, of course. Must be a fun job. All of your transactions here in Salesforce with all of your transactions out on the gateway. So this gateway ID is what they're going to call a transaction ID out on most of your gateways. This is the opportunity, of course, that we've tied it to, and I mentioned that the gateway is kind of a central component to our solution, and then here's the gateway that this particular charge was made against. A lot of different gateways provide an authorization ID. Of course, we store that. And then we store, exactly what happened here. So in this case, it was an approved charge. Those are the most common transactions. But you've actually got 4 different transaction types, right? It could have been an authorization, a void, a refund, or of course a charge. We also take a lot of care to make sure we trap all of the different data about what exactly transpired, what's the response message, and so on, so that people can easily go to Google and figure out why something got declined, if it in fact did get declined. The rest of this stuff should look familiar, right? It's credit card information and the billing information that we had, because obviously you could change that every time you run a transaction. We need to keep track of what it was when you ran the transaction. Down here at the bottom, we've got all the data that they gave us back. Well, not technically all the data. We cleaned it up a little bit. You don't want passwords and such on there. But basically, we capture all of that. So if you get an error that doesn't make any sense and you imagine maybe we didn't store it correctly, you can come down here and find out exactly what we received when we got that back from the gateway. So that's a really basic charge, right? That's just a one-time charge. And we're going to go back and take a look at another idea, which is a monthly charge that we've got here. So this is the other kind of thing that we're pretty popular with companies that need to do recurring charges. And so obviously with a recurring charge, that's where we say, hey, I'm going to sign up for the gym and I want to, well, I don't want to, but I'm going to pay you $70 a month to probably not come to the gym if you're anything like me. And we can collect all of that here inside of Chargent. And so if it's a recurring transaction, I just go ahead and simply set the field. Now our system is smart enough that when we get an error, we get a declined card, for instance, we come in and set this to error. You can also come in, you could tell us that you only want to charge this card 6 times, you only want to charge the card 12 times, whatever the case may be. And when when our system runs through that, we come back and set this particular payment status to complete, to let you know that it's done. The payment stop, this is where you can determine all the different types of billing that you may be doing. So our personal favorite is unending. You keep charging until they tell you to stop. But you could have a number of other things. You may have a balance due. You agree that they're going to pay you $1,200, $100 a month. You could handle that. You may also have an agreement that they're only going to pay 4 instances of $150 or something like that. You could handle that with count. And if you needed to pay close attention to your contract end date, you could simply say to charge them a particular frequency until a date is reached. So we've got pretty much all the different payment frequencies that I think you could imagine. Nobody's asked for a new one in a while. Somebody asked for biennial. I'm still not sure why they only need to charge once every 2 years, but we implemented it for them. And whoever has the daily charge business model, I'd like to find out about that because I'd like to implement it myself. But I think we've pretty much hit just about. I haven't seen it. Nobody's asked for hourly yet. I think that'd be interesting. We can support any currency. The currency is really just a data field for us. We just need to tell the processor what currency it's supposed to be processed in. So once in a while we do get asked for new currencies. We obviously don't have anywhere near all the world's currencies, but we certainly have the majors. And it's easy for us to add them. If a customer needed a new one, it's not a big deal. So over here, with the charge date, we can actually, of course, need to give you the ability to tell us when you want to charge the card. We can do that. Some of the models out there are kind of based on looking at when the last charge was done and then charging it again, but you run into problems there. What if we had a decline and we needed to take that into consideration? It took us a week to collect that money or something like that. You still need to charge them on the 15th of next month rather than the 22nd like you did this time. Payment start date, fairly straightforward. When did I start charging this person? And then we also implemented next transaction date. So this is kind of an interesting and kind of a subtle thing that we did. Was, next transaction date's not a formula, right? It's a hard written field, and we write that with code every time we interact with the object. And the reason we did that was that we've tried to be kind of the most flexible system that we could be, right? And we wanted system administrators to be able to go in and really have a lot of control over what they're doing here. So the next transaction date, because we just print the field out, we actually write it with a trigger. It's not that sophisticated what we did, but the concept behind it was quite powerful. Now our admins were able to go in and say 3 days before we're going to charge that card, send them an email notification, and we put that power back in the admin's hands. The other kind of fields we've got here really just have to do with when we're going to end charging, right? So payment end date, payment count. In this case, we're using a token, so we've cleared out the card number. We've actually given you quite a bit of flexibility in that respect too. We had some customers that wanted to keep the actual card number. We keep it encrypted here in Salesforce, which can be PCI compliant if you're concerned about that. And they wanted to get the token and store the credit card number. So we actually implemented functionality that allows them to do that. It's your choice. We can either clear out the credit card number every time we get it. You just set a field on the gateway record to do this. Or you can keep them forever, or you can only clear out when you get a successful. We got a few other options like that, but again, we wanted to try and put the power back in the hands of the administrator. So let's go take a look at the actual transactions that are being generated here. And I guess it's the moment of truth. We'll find out if we got a charge. Yes, just yesterday like we should have. So, just what, 36 hours ago or something, the system woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning. So you can set the scheduled Apex job to run whenever you want. Well, roughly. Salesforce will give you options, but pretty much any time of the day you want. And go ahead and run it. So at this one, you can see that I'm running basically at kind of 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so those are the basic types, right? We can run it one time, we can run a recurring charge. You can use the functionality I've shown you to also set up a scheduled charge. So if you need to charge somebody on the 20th of next month, because that's the agreement, you can do that. We actually work with a lot of student loan reduction companies or debt consolidation organizations. And so that type of functionality is really important to them, and we've got that handled. So that's kind of the basic functionality. One of the other things that we were getting asked about a lot of times is our customers wanted to be able to really do a couple of things. One of the things was that they wanted to be able to take the need for their call center to even hear the credit card number. For some reason they didn't trust minimum wage people with credit card numbers. I'm not sure why that was. But they asked us to come up with a solution so that they wouldn't have to do that. And it's kind of a funny thing when you start talking to the developers. Actually, a friend of mine happens to use the same consulting firm that we use to do some of our work. And he called me up and he's like, I understand that you asked them to make a pay link. I'm like, uh-huh. And he's like, that was my idea. And I was like, your idea? Didn't realize I was speaking to Elon Musk of PayPal fame. Like, you were the first one to think of this. We're all really impressed. But anyways, I think, nonetheless, it's kind of something that you need to have these days. And so we set it up. So that's a very simple one that I've done here. What's going on right now is there was actually just an email sent. I don't happen to have my email turned on this laptop at the moment. But an email was sent on my behalf. Now, you can do this a few different ways. This is the most simple way where kind of the use case here is somebody called into the call center, you take all their information and you send them a quick email to say, hey, go fill this out for me and give me your credit card information. And that's what this particular use case is. We've got one customer that's sending out 20,000 emails every morning on this system, okay? And they're actually going in and creating, programmatically creating 20,000 of these pay requests, okay? So pay requests is an object that we have. It quite simply just, anytime you create a new pay request in our system, we create one of these ugly pay links. And when somebody clicks that pay link, like they can here, they're going to go to a website. Now, I've got a very basic website set up here. We've just got our actual Visualforce component. But any of you Visualforce developers would be able to take our component and you wrap your own Visualforce page around it. You feed us a couple of parameters, and we take care of all the heavy lifting of validating the credit card, sending it out to the gateway, so on and so forth. And so your customer could easily update this. I mean, at the moment it's in Arizona. Let's do an address here in town. I'm not going to worry about my typing at the moment. I suppose you'll all forgive me. And then we did a couple of interesting things here. So I think, notice it's orange now, and as soon as I finish typing a valid number, and it's actually not just looking at, whether or not I got the right number of digits. It's looking at a few other things, making sure that it's actually a legitimate credit card. You'll notice that we also figure out that it's a Visa card. For some reason, it really bothers me that, we know that that's a Visa card. Why did I have to tell you that's a Visa card? It's not making your system any more secure. If I'm smart enough to steal a Visa card, I'm smart enough to tell you 4 because it's a Visa card, right? So we finally, found a solution that took care of that, which I personally was very happy about. So if I refresh this page and go back to my transactions, you can see we just got a new transaction here at 7:33 just now. We got a brand new transaction in the system. We got an approved transaction. So that's our pay request feature. Our customers have responded really, really well to that feature. Almost all of our new sales since we implemented it, have used it. We've been pretty happy about that. But again, that was a really basic. That's just, I really need to spend the time to put a wrapper around that so I can show something prettier. That's really just the basic feature. So Chargent dashboard. So what are some of the different things we can take a look at? So first off, we're 100% native. That's important for a couple of reasons. If you're trying to manage PCI scope, again, all your data rests on Salesforce. It ultimately becomes Salesforce's responsibility to protect that data. And they are PCI DSS level 1 compliant to store your data while it's at rest. The other thing that's really important is all of your data is now stored inside of Salesforce, which means all of the data tools that you're used to using are going to work. Okay, this is, I think you guys are probably pretty familiar with that. We just did some basic things here. So, on the left-hand column, we're really just looking at how much cash have I brought in. And so, I can see exactly how much money has come in over my transactions. And in the center, I can start to take a look at my recurring payments. So, if a lot of our customers are SaaS companies that need to keep track of how much they're growing their customer base in terms of recurring payments, and that's what the center column's looking at. And then on the right-hand column, we start looking at when are customers paying. So the top right column is just, or the top right chart rather, is just taking a look at, in this case, we've just got a few different recurring payments in this particular system, and they all happen to be monthly. And whoops, there we go. And we can also take a look at success rates. So in this case, I've got a 78% where I get an approved transaction, and I've got about 22% there that is not transacting correctly. And then I can also see down at the bottom my response messages from the gateways as to whether or not as to why my transactions aren't being approved. And then kind of going back to the native piece, so a lot of our customers can really spend a lot of time expanding our solution. Okay, so you can use your own Apex, your own workflow, all the stuff that you're used to using inside of Salesforce. Of course, you can use on our app because again we're 100% native. So here's a great example. So if you've been up wine tasting, you might be familiar with a company called Colgan. These guys have been a happy customer for something like 5 years now. I have yet to taste the $300 bottle of wine. I'm sure it's absolutely phenomenal. I think it would still be wasted on me. I'm waiting till the point where I'm going to actually understand why it's worth that much money. But their customers obviously feel that it is. And this is 100% on Chargent. So I've got a cart built up here, and apparently 12 bottles of wine is $3,500. And I'm going to, these are real prices actually. Not a real website at the moment, but real prices. And everything you're seeing here, so remember a moment ago when I showed you the pay request, it was kind of bland, very plain Jane. But this is all the Chargent pieces underlying this. And it's obviously, they've looked kind of however they wanted to make it look. We've had other customers kind of make theirs even look more and more sophisticated. But at the end of the day, and I guess I'll also mention that this page is actually built on Salesforce sites, as you can see in the URL there, as was the other example that I gave on the web. But you could also do API. So we extended the Salesforce API, of course, with our own calls. And so if you wanted to go and write your own e-commerce system, we've had a number of customers do that, and so on and so forth. We personally don't play in the e-commerce space. We leave that to our partners and our customers. But you could use our solution to extend it. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them. Yeah, either confused you all or got it all covered. Lusa.
Can you split transaction onto separate credit card?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, you totally could. So we don't have like particularly an interface for it, but if they owed you say $100, you want to put $50 on one, $50 on another. Your opportunity amount would represent your whole, in this case, if this was that example, you've got $600, if you want to put 600 on one and 600 on another, that's what this charge amount field's for. I can just update that to the amount I want, and I could process the two different pieces. So I'd do one transaction here, and then just do another for whatever the other amount is. You could put half of it on a ACH or e-check payment, half of it on a credit card. That would be no big deal. You could write your own UI if you wanted to handle it as well.
What's the cost of the app?
So, yeah, it's a great question. If you buy before the end of the month, we're in the midst of we legitimately are changing the prices, is how I prefer to put it at the moment. And we were $5 per user per month. And I think that made more sense a couple of years ago before we had kind of the sophistication that we have today. But we've raised it to $10 per user per month at the moment, which with the amount of pushback I've gotten on that, we probably should have made it $25 per user per month. But
Now, for example, the company get 25 people, get only one person who's doing accounting. Would you charge for the 25 or you charge for one person?
Good question. So we, somewhere in the middle. So we do have your base subscription is going to be either, $600 today or $1,200 next month, and that includes your first 10 users.
So pretty much you gotta get 10 users.
That's right, yeah. People, for some reason, responded much differently when I said, there's a $600 minimum, that includes your first 10 users, got a much better reaction than you've got a 10 user minimum. For some reason, that irritated me.
No, there's only one accountant who charge all the money.
I'm sorry.
You have a sales team, and most people are doing sales, only one person who's doing accounting, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Well,
one user for specific need an app. the rest
Yeah.
don't.
that's one way to look at it. I mean, generally speaking, the reason you would buy our app is to
Yeah,
either
right.
distribute that work against your entire sales team, or to give them the ability to send that payment request and push that work out to the customer. And so, and in either of those situations, all of the sales team would need to have access to our application to do that, if that makes sense. And so, I mean, well, the reason a lot of people buy our solution is because they're kind of moving up. They probably used to go just directly into authorize.net and put in the information. They don't have a lot of security at the user level on a lot of those systems. And so if you and I both have access, we've got the same access to the whole system. So a lot of times people come to us because they need to distribute that access, but then distribute some parts of the access, but then restrict the specifics of what those folks have access to.
So why don't you also add a component of how many transactions they do in the billing? I mean.
Oh, because when the app was created, we couldn't do that yet. Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable?
Oh yeah, that would have been, that was kind of, so we weren't the first ones to build the app. We bought the app from somebody else a couple of years ago. But, so Jim, when he built it, that was his plan. Salesforce, I think we call them usage metrics today, wasn't available then, and so we didn't even have the ability to see that. Because we're 100% native, we literally cannot see our customers' data unless they give us access to it. So the simple answer to why we don't do it is because we technically couldn't for a long
So a
time.
related question I had with the API, and help me understand, if they start using the API, then do they have to share the blame or the blame if they move some data out on their system? Is that how it would work?
Oh.
From Matt's perspective?
So you're asking if they use our API to move their data off Salesforce, kind of what's their security ramifications?
Right.
I mean, there are real security ramifications to that. Yeah, I mean, they would be no different than if you downloaded the data in some other form and moved it. I mean, once you take it off Salesforce, Salesforce is no longer responsible for it. Neither would we.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, typically, so I know more about PCI compliance than I ever wanted to, and I mean, the short answer there is that you've got to have procedures around that. In order to become PCI certified, you would have a procedure defined in your PCI, either SAQ or your QSA would work through you to have this procedure defined there about what you would do in a situation where either somebody had that access, or if somebody had that access for a legitimate reason and needed to have that access, all the rules around it. So, yeah, you can do it, but you need to be careful. Cool. Good?
Good.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your attention.